If you're on the lookout for an editing plugin that allows you to have complete control over emulating film looks into your work, then take a look at Dehancer Pro in this video today. This one is going to be quite a long one, as I'm going to go through the entire toolkit available within Dehancer Pro, show you how it works, run you through its capabilities and also its limitations, so you can choose for yourself whether it's worth adding to your own toolkit as a film editor. As always, I hope you're all keeping as well as you can be. Today's video is the first in-depth review that I've done in a long time, and the guys at Dehancer got in touch with me a few weeks ago and asked if I wanted to give Dehancer Pro a try and see what I thought of it. As someone who isn't an editor full-time, I thought it would be helpful to make a full review of this for anyone out there who might not also have a huge amount of knowledge around film emulation, but wants to see if they benefit from having a plugin software like Dehancer Pro should the right time ever come around, whether that's you being involved in a film, commercial work, or even your own stuff. Over the years, you might have installed sound effects, overlays, textures, and more, but there's one area of post-production elements that I've wanted to always explore further, which are film emulation plugins, which is what this video is going to be about, in particular the Dehancer Pro OFX video plugin. Now, I've already taken a quick look at the interface, purely so that I have a bit of an understanding about how to use it for the benefit of this review, rather than the majority of this video being me going, where the so that's the, nope. But I haven't delved into Dehancer properly at all, so this is more like a first impressions video to start with. We'll explore the software for a bit using some footage that I've captured, show off the range of film emulations that Dehancer has to offer, as well as what is an impressive amount of flexibility in really fine-tuning your look, rather than the limited offerings that Premiere Pro might give you as standard. At the end, I'll give a considered opinion and conclusion about what Dehancer has to offer, who this is suitable for, and how much it can assist filmmakers like yourselves. So let's get the remaining disclosures quickly out of the way. I'm not a dedicated colorist. I like to dabble into color, but it's not something that I do regularly. However, as someone who gets involved in independent productions where you find yourself with limited crew, I want to see how beneficial having something like Dehancer can be to improve or enhance my own work. I've not been paid by Dehancer to make this video, but they have sent me the plugin to use and to test out to allow me to give a proper verdict of it for you guys. The footage that I'm going to be using was all shot on the Sony FX6 with a 24-70 and the 70-200 f2.8 lenses with a quarter strength Pro Mist filter, and all shot in 4K 100p in 10-bit 422. Although we're going to be applying that film look that emulates age and seems broken down in some ways, particularly with the grain, it's always worth having the highest amount of information to capture that you can then seemingly take away from. And finally, I'll be using the Adobe Premiere Pro version of Dehancer, which can also be used within After Effects. I've taken a quick look at reviews online for DaVinci Resolve, and they look very similar, so I'm hoping that this review can also be applied to just anyone thinking of getting Dehancer, regardless of their editing platform of choice. So first of all, you treat Dehancer like any other effect or preset within Premiere Pro. Once it's installed, you'll find Dehancer Pro in your effects panel. Either search Dehancer, there it is, or you can find it within Video Effect and Film Emulation. So we're going to be using this clip of a mate of mine called Elliot as the main reference for the tutorial, but I've got plenty of other shots that we'll occasionally cross over to as well. What I've done first of all, before we really get going, is add a quick 709 look onto the image using Sony's S-Log3 S-Gamut 3 Cine profile. Use that LUT onto there, done a little bit more tweaking within the Lumetri panel, as you can see, just to give it a quite normal look. Nothing fancy, just as standard as they come. From this point, we'll then add the effect on top and see where we get. So once you apply the effect onto your chosen clip, here is what you're faced with. You essentially have 19 drop-down menus, all that have different features within them that you can adjust to your own accord. So it only makes sense to do this in chronological order, because that's the way that Dehancer want users to use the actual plugin as well. And there is a reason behind it, which we'll realize as we go through this tutorial. The first drop-down menu, called Input, allows you to set your input settings, such as the source of footage and what stage of correction or color grade that's already been applied. If you've already corrected your footage with a Rec 709 LUT, for example, like we already have, your source would need to be set to Rec 709 because that's the stage that we're now applying these effects. But what's cool about this menu is that it also allows you to choose the camera that you've shot with, the color profile, and also the base ISO too. which is great for cameras like this one where you have 2 native ISOs. Now going down this route and choosing the camera applies a lot into the footage, but I would say that it's not a straight out of the box result. I'll just quickly disable the original Lumetri that we've had on originally. So that is the image that we get straight out of the box when we tell Dehancer what camera we've shot on. It's already applied its own version of the Rec. 709 LUT rather than doing your own colour correction beforehand and then using that as your starting point. Personally, I think if we do it this way through Dehancer and telling which camera we've used, the results are still quite flat, which is definitely a subjective opinion. Within Dehancer you can manipulate the footage a lot more, but we'll discuss that shortly. All I'd say is if you do have the knowledge of colour correction, I'd suggest doing that first and then applying your film look using the Rec. 709 as the starting point. Another thing to point out is that the temperature compensation doesn't provide the same results as if you did it using Premiere's white balance tool and Lumetri. Here I've applied a rather emphasised 60% tint towards warm in Lumetri, and here is when I do it the same way but within Dehancer's temperature control. There's definitely a greener look to the footage, and although it does have the tint compensation tool to level that out, it's not a like for like comparison. At this point I'm going to start duplicating the clip so we've got reference points from what we used to have and then we can compare it against as well. Just one sec. So this is the one with the 60% temperature compensation towards warm within Dehancer, and if I just compare it against the first clip, you can tell that the one on the right is much greener than if we apply the exact same level of white balance in Dehancer versus Lumetri on the left. You can rectify this though. If you add, let's have a look, say about, that's not a bad shout actually. If we add about 17% of the tint compensation into the image, it's then starting to replicate the look what you get from Lumetri straight away. So it's fixable, it's just an extra step. Now we get to the film section, which is where we get to see a difference and start heading towards that film look that you might be after. Do note that when Dehancer is applied, only the following categories are automatically enabled throughout all of the tools available. These are film, expand, print, and film grain. All of the remaining tools are disabled as standard. So if you're adjusting these but nothing seems to change, you need to enable that section by enabling the tick box at the bottom of each menu category. This is definitely not because I fell for this and wondered why nothing was happening. Promise. Oh my god, you think I'm lying, don't? Within the film section, there is a vast amount of film profiles here. I've just counted 63, and those include your popular film choices like Kodak, Fujifilm, Polaroid and more, so you're highly likely to find and simulate a film look that you're after. The Kodak Vision 3 250D is the default look that you are given, which appears to be towards the bottom of the options available. I'm not sure if this is the most popular within users and therefore is there as standard, but to be honest, I found that this doesn't work straight away with the Sony FX6 footage. So I resorted to using the Cine Still 50D film look for this example. One thing that I did notice was that I wasn't able to flick through all of the presets using the arrow keys on my keyboard. It automatically closes the drop down as soon as you click one, so you have to go back into the menu again to click another to view. You can use the scroller on your mouse when you hover over the drop down, and that does work, but I think having a feature similar to your font choices in Adobe software where it previews it by pressing down on the arrow key before clicking it would be really beneficial for something like this, rather than relying on a scroller, because if you aren't hovering over the drop down properly, you'll end up scrolling down your effect controls panel by mistake and potentially mess something up by accident. Just a tiny complaint, but nothing major and something we could easily get used to be fair. The push-pull slider allows you to choose between a washed out look and a sepia look, which to be fair, in either direction I go, it does make the footage look nice regardless. This isn't either a white balance or a saturation slider. If anything, for us folk who don't know the proper terminology for film emulations, I see this as an aging slider, as in my opinion it makes the footage look older in both ways you slide it, but it's just down to personal preference which you prefer. As long as it's matching the style that you're after, you're fine. As we head to the film developer section, this allows you to adjust the amount of contrast, gamma correction, colour separation and colour boost. Again, just make sure that it's enabled on the tick box in order for these effects to take place. Contrast is self-explanatory, and as you slide across this, you can see how it's stretching that contrast out. I'm going to boost it to around 31. Again, it's worth pointing out that this is an external plugin to Adobe. Although the amount you can adjust this is plus or minus 100, it's not a direct comparison to Lumetri here. If I adjusted my contrast by an additional 31 within Lumetri, it's nowhere near as contrasty as what Dehancer applies. Now, gamma correction slightly adjusts the brightness of the footage, but not to the levels of your typical brightness dials you've used elsewhere. It's marginal, but enough to work with for fine tuning. Color separation and color boost essentially controls your saturation, with color boost being the one that really stretches out those colors. I'm going to leave color separation to its default here, but adjust the color boost slightly to around, I don't know, 20, 25, 30%. No, let's go 25 to give it a bit more of a pop. So it's already looking quite nice at this point. If I just disable Dehancer, I mean, you can see what it used to look like. That looks horrible now, doesn't it? I'm going to enable that quickly. Next up is film compression. In simpler terms, see it as a limiter for your footage, especially in the highlights. So first of all, make sure it's enabled, and you can already see what it does to the footage. Here, I'd recommend referring to your waveforms if you have a good understanding of them, so you can see what your changes are doing to the footage here. With this footage, I think it's made the clouds lose the detail a bit, as they're the brightest parts of the image. So let's drop that white point down slightly from 100 to probably about there. There we see the clarity is back a little bit, but not too much that it's starting to look digital again. Tonal range and color density, they look pretty fine to me. I don't think we need to do, I mean, you can maybe bring that down a little bit. As standard, it's around the 30 mark. Could maybe just bring that down to 60. And color density, not really doing that much, so I'm going to leave it as it is, that one. Now, weirdly enough, just after we've added our compression, Dehancer is now giving us the option to expand. In here, you can adjust your black point and your white point. The black point seems to imitate the faded film tool that you get within the creative panel of Lumetri, so I'm just going to adjust that accordingly. With white point, it's a very cool way of showing that blown out look that you often see in home movies from back in the 90s. So if that's the style that you're after in your work, this could really help you out nicely. I won't go for that look on this occasion. Maybe somewhere around there looks pretty good, around the 94 mark. Just brings those highlights back up to around the 95 IRE scale, so I'm happy with that. As we're heading to print, you'll notice a few of these sliders produce similar results to what we've already seen, which I usually can find a tad confusing. But the thing to remember is that Dehancer has cleverly arranged this plugin layout so that there's the appropriate tools within each aspect of building up this film emulation. I'm going to leave all of this the same, just because on this occasion, I don't feel the need to utilize everything. Color head is up next, and this is where you can get really funky with it. For someone at my level, I don't really know the best way to approach this section, and if someone is watching this who wants to hire me as a colorist, I don't want to cock it up. So for professional reasons, I'm not going to do too much here, but I'll quickly show you what the sliders do to the footage. Here you've got your yellow and blue tint, which obviously makes things... Oh, I did the thing where I didn't check it was enabled. Yellow to blue. I think for music videos and stuff like that, you could really add something, you know, using this. For this example, I just don't think that those three especially aren't really going to add much to the look that I'm going for. Oh, in fact, I do like what the shadows tone's doing. So I might boost that up to the 54 mark. Just adding a touch more contrast. It might be crushing at the bottom here, but later on we'll fix that. You know what? The midtones are adding really nicely as well. So let's shift that to around there, 36 mark. That looks pretty good to me. It's starting to look a little bit red, so let's just bring this cyan red actually. Let's utilize this a little bit and just move it a smidge away. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Film grain, now you're talking. This is different to the film profile we added earlier, as that adds a certain characteristic to the footage. But with this, you can see how the different grain profiles affect the amount of character of grain on screen. You are given the 35mm ISO 250 grain profile as standard, but if I do adjust this, you can see that the higher ISO profiles give you a bit more grain, and obviously the lower ISOs give you a cleaner look. Your choice here can obviously depend on whether you've been told by a client or director to replicate a particular reel of film, or if you're shooting a film at night and you're wanting it to look like it was shot on film. I'd personally light the set so I can produce a clean image, but bring that grain back in, as that'd feel more natural. In fact, I've also got another shot of another mate, Callum, who is Elliot's brother, when we were testing out a little poker blackjack scene in a dark room. So let's see how Dehancer would look on that footage instead. I'm going to quickly add the Rec 709 look just like before, not do any adjustments to this one, just for a quick reference. Then if I hop into Dehancer, add that to the clip. There it is, set to 709. And then in terms of the film profile, that one's pretty nice. I like that. It's a bit different to before, but it adds quite a noirish vibe to it. Let's bring the color boost slightly down, almost like a almost desaturated look. Let's try, that's -17, that looks pretty nice. Let's bring the tonal range all the way down to 0. Yeah, that just looks too flat. There's no, there's no definition on cal there, but if we just drop that completely, you've got that lighting that we've purposely added in for the shoot. For those who are solely used to digital filmmaking, like me, the best way to treat these grain profiles are still quite similar to how we apply ISO nowadays to our work. Your 8mm, your 16mm, 35mm films are similar to the step-ups in sensor size we see, such as Micro Four Thirds to Super 35 to full frame and to 65mm large frame that you'd see in the Alexa 65. As these sensor sizes increase, you typically have improved low light performance. So then if you applied that logic alongside the different ISO levels that Dehancer give you here, the noisiest grain would be from an 8mm at ISO 500 and the cleanest would be at 65mm ISO 50. I think for this example, the 35mm 500 seems the best one. Seems a nice level of grain on him. Let's just quickly add these effects onto the remaining 2 shots and see how this looks as a scene. Pretty cool. Not perfect, but I'm doing this as quickly as possible. Anyway, back to this little stud muffin. I think the 35mm ISO 250 works best here. Again, considering now we're back outdoors, but I still want those film characteristics in the image without it looking unnatural. If we went for the 8mm ISO 500, no. That looks nice. It's not too much. It's not too, I mean, it's still obvious, especially if you know, when you look back at the clean footage that is squeaky clean. Once you get used to that image of the grain and with all the other shots, if this was in a piece of work and all the shots had grain, all the shots had this washed out look, it would look fine. I'm not trying to justify a shoddy attempt at grading. So after film grain comes halation, which is a fun word to say. I want to remove that digital look that Sony cameras give you nowadays. So if we take a look especially on Elliot's cap, you can see how once I enable this section and mess around with some of these options, ooh, you can see that fake halation around Elliot's cap, which doesn't look too unrealistic, especially with the 65mm options like that. If I just disable it, if we're looking here around the edges, let's just enable it. You just get a slight little orange. That's the best way to describe it. It's just something. I tell you what you can do is if you enable mask mode, you can see what's being added to the image, which I think is a really nice little tool there. Well done, Dehancer, not you. I mean, the 8mm ones are just far too strong. They don't look great. They'll work in other situations, but not this one. I think either 65 or 35. No, 65. Bloom time. Right, let's enable this one. Ooh. You can see it mostly on Elliot's face there. And although we did shoot with the quarter strength Pro Mist on the lens, I do like what this bloom effect's doing to it. I am a fan. And what I'll do is I'll just match this bloom profile to the halation profile. I just think they work quite nicely together. Right, we're getting there, I promise. I'll also show some other footage examples towards the end of this video, but I just wanted to, like I said earlier, refer to one image so we can see the gradual effects changing place. Film damage. Now I really like this option as it really adds to that film emulation rather than just sticking a bit of grain on top of some footage and saying it looks like film. Again, you've got the 4 different reels of film that you can choose from. So your 8mm looks really, you know, this is what you see on the home movie stuff. Doesn't work for this, but I can definitely see that working in other situations. Let's quickly show you 16mm. I'm guessing it will be less obvious, but still there. Yeah, I think it's still too much. 35. Sorry if the playback's not that great. My computer's getting old. That's nice. It's just got little bits up here every now and again. And again, just like the logic that we've been taking into consideration with the film grain, 65mm is probably the cleanest looking film damage. Yeah, still there, but I'm liking 35 on that one. Can't tell on pause. Let me just quickly render this out and see how good it's looking. Yeah, it's looking nice. Film breath essentially emulates a small light leak equivalent that you once got with actual film. It seems to add a tiny amount of contrast when applied, but nothing too noticeable, but I do like it. In fact, if we added the film breath to the poker scene, let's go for like 16 mil. Let's have a look at that. It's so subtle, but it's a tiny little flicker that you're getting on the film, and it does add to the illusion. But if we do go back to Elliot's example, it would be a lot less obvious, mostly because we're outdoors. I think you can really see it on the shadows and in darker lit environments rather than, let's enable it. And yeah, I just don't think you're going to tell as much. With gate weave, what that does is I feel like it applies a small handheld preset. It would work really nicely, again, like I said earlier, on the home video style footage that you might be trying to replicate, or if the shot was originally locked off on a tripod but you want to add that little bit of movement. But as I purposely shot this handheld and to get some parallax between Elliot and the background, I'm going to leave it off. And bearing in mind, to create that little handheld wobble, it does crop the image a little bit. When overscan is applied, this adds an overlay to your image that you will have no doubt seen on asset websites, but I do like how this is actually integrated within Dehancer, so it's all in one area when it comes to film emulation, rather than having multiple effects and layers to get your desired look. For this shot, I don't really think it would work, but I have got a shot of me walking. Let me just grab that. There we go. Now this was shot in 4K 100, so if I just bring that back up to real time, and then let's just quickly grab the grade. I'm doing this really quickly, it's not going to be perfect, but if we apply it to this, let's just stick it on half speed. Actually looks pretty cool even with the glitch. But yeah, I think it works better for real-time content that you're capturing, not necessarily slow motion that that we film a lot of nowadays, whether it's 50p, 100 frames, even slower in some cases. If you were to use this, I'd probably revert to this style where it's more real time. Also, because slow motion wasn't around back then, I think that's why it's contributing, and that's why it doesn't make sense when using this overscan over slow-mo footage. You've got loads of controls here with the tools within the overscan. You can scale in and out the amount of that crop that the overlay adds onto the image. To be fair, I just like that standard one. Quickly go through the other ones. You've got widescreen 35mm, ultra panavision 65mm, which super 16, I like that. Standard 16, and then you've got super 8 as well. I think let's go back to what it was, which I think was super 35, was it? Over to vignette now, and whilst if we wanted to, we could have applied this within the Lumetri tab at the color correction or grade stage. Let's see how well it performs within here. Now you actually get a few more controls that you can adjust, more than your standard vignette feature within Premiere. I'm getting confused now. So alongside your exposure, your size, and your feathering of your vignette, I do like, let me just bring that down a little bit, maybe not that bad. Minus 0.2 is nice. What I do like is this, the ability to control the center point of that vignette. As standard in Premiere, it's just in the middle and everything just comes from that central point. Whereas in here, what you have got the ability to do is move the center point of that vignette around on the X and Y axis. Now I kind of like, that might still be too strong. Let's just do minus 0.1. What I'm going to do is pop it up in this corner because that's the direction of the sun. So I feel like naturally that might be a little bit brighter than the other side. It's a mental thing. It's not technically right, but I kind of like the idea of having that vignette. That's it normally, but then with a little vignette over in this top right corner, I think it looks quite nice. And that is pretty much it in terms of the creative adjustments that you can make. But Dehancer also has some final checks that you can do, such as checking false color alongside the IR rescale, and also a clipping indicator so that you can see whereabouts your footage is clipping or crushed after applying all those effects. Personally, I think a little bit of crushing works quite nicely, and it isn't hugely noticeable or ruins the look that we've got going on. It also has an output gauge where you can globally increase or decrease the entire library of effects that's been applied. So this works nicely as a before and after reference, But if you do feel at this point that the overall effect is too strong, now's the chance to dial that back in a little bit if you like. Let's drop it to about 91%. And then finally, right at the very end, here's your device information, but the LUT generator is a really nice little touch. This essentially means you can export everything that you've made within this as a LUT, as a cube file, meaning you could, in essence, upload this onto a monitor and have it as a preview LUT. Really nice touch there. Now I'm at a stage where I'm happy with the film look that we've achieved. Now's the chance to hop back into Lumetri with the film emulation applied and make a few adjustments so that I'm fully happy. What I'm going to do is I'm going to head into the curves panel and just make a few adjustments. I feel like these blues and greens, I feel like we can adjust them a little bit to look a little bit more rustic. Is that the right word? So let's try and find the colour green. I mean, you can tell what it's doing to the exact colour that we've picked. I think that's too much. Let's stretch this out, touch more, hand over to this side without affecting Elliot's skin tone, I think. Stopping them from being as green as they were, just lifting them towards the yellows a little bit. And then with the sky, I feel like it just looks a little bit, I wouldn't say cold, but it does look, yeah, it did look a little bit cold. Make him a little bit teal, looks nice. Let's just desaturate them colours as well. Something like that. Yeah. Let's take a quick look at what our final image looks like. Really nice. And if we just remove that completely, this is what we had originally. So it's clean, squeaky clean. It's not perfectly color corrected, but I'm not too fussed about that. We've made that emulation really give it its own character. So now we've gone through all of the features. Here are a few more clips that I've applied the software onto for a bit more variety. Whilst I'm just rendering these out for preview purposes in the timeline, this is about 40 seconds of additional clips that I'm just adding the effects onto, which is Lumetri and Dehancer. It's taken about 2 minutes to preview 30 seconds, so it does take a little bit of power, but if you've got time to make a brew, treat yourself. And I'm sure that with a, oh, hey, it's working. I'm sure that with a quicker graphics card than what I've got, which is, I think it's the 3070 series from NVIDIA. Yeah. So there are better ones out there, which I completely understand. So that's looking nice. I like that. Sponsored by Adidas. It's not. So together and collectively, that style that we're going for just seems to work really nicely across it all. It was as cringy as it looks when we were shooting this. I didn't have anything else to use as an example, so I was like, Elliot, what are you doing? Do you fancy a bit of shooting? Which now leaves me with actually rendering this as a video file. So let's see how long these clips take. I'll put it under here because I've not done it yet, obviously. I also appreciate, as I just said a minute ago, everyone has different computer specs. So in the interest of fairness to everyone involved, I'll render out these clips with just the initial Lumetri correction applied and then with the Dehancer plugin enabled on all of the clips to see how long it takes, and we can compare those rather than just my computer versus nothing else. So as we start to wrap up this video, let's talk about cost. It seems as though Dehancer are really understanding that not everyone needs everything, so they offer a range of versions to suit your needs, both from a duration point of view but also a features point of view. This review has been using the Dehancer Pro version, which includes everything that they have on offer, but there's also Dehancer Lite, which includes a scaled back version of the tools I've gone through today, Dehancer Grain for if you already have a dedicated film profile plugin but are just after the grain effect, and then all of the additional tools towards the bottom of the toolkit are also available, such as bloom, breath, damage, halation, and then the monitoring indicators, which that one is actually free to download. You can choose whether to have Dehancer for 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, or as a lifetime subscription. The Dehancer Pro plugin as a lifetime purchase is $449 plus VAT, but the guys at Dehancer have been really kind in offering a discount with my own code, which I'll leave in the description of the video. So a huge thanks to the team at Dehancer in providing that opportunity. Now we know the cost, the next question naturally is it worth it? Personally, I think it is, and I'm not just saying that. I've never really experienced film emulation in the stuff that I've edited for clients and myself in the past, but now I've been introduced to it, I can definitely see myself wanting to implement this into more of my work. It's understandably a plugin that some NLEs don't focus on internally, but it's evident that Dehancer gives us a wide range of options and tools in order to get your money's worth. Also, as someone who doesn't know the ins and outs of software like DaVinci Resolve, the naming of these features are easy enough to understand and gives me enough flexibility to make the footage look how I want it to, without it just being a guessing game of what tools I'm manipulating. I did mention a few things in the video where I found the software limiting in its usability, such as not being able to flick through all the presets using the arrow keys. Looking back, that is such a minute frustration and something that I could quickly get used to, but essentially the fact that I'm nitpicking at stuff like that shows that I can't really find any tools or features that I feel are missing. Maybe that's down to me not being a dedicated editor full time, and someone else might find ways to improve it, but for someone at my level, it's a great piece of software. Using this does slow the computer down slightly. It takes a little longer to load the effect control when clicking onto a clip, but it's more than tolerable, and in fairness, I do now have a computer that's not keeping up with the latest releases. I'm fairly certain that any newer computers than mine, which was built in 2021, would now handle this much more quickly. There is a time and a place for film emulation, but when you do need it, I'd say Dehancer is a great tool to have that's worth the purchase. I really hope that you found this useful. Let me know if you did enjoy it. Don't forget to drop the video a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so for more videos like this, and I'll see you next time.